we have a special keynote speaker, Gianluca from the speaker team. He's the team leader there. Gianluca has over 20 years of experience in China, managing more than 40 projects in product safety, energy, waste management, and environmental protection. He's worked with the Sino-Italian Cooperation Program and the German Organization for International Cooperation, promoting international collaboration specifically between Chinese and European governments. So I'd like to welcome Gianluca.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. For me, it's a great pleasure and honor to attend this training event developed and organized in cooperation with HQTS, that is SPIC long-standing partner in China and in Southeast Asia. So thanks again to HQTS for the great support. The reason of this webinar, it's very simple, because of course, Vietnamese economy is developing year over year, more and more, and we can see how stringent are the relations between Vietnam and Europe. SPIC, as a European-founded project, focus its core work on supporting manufacturers, exporters, developers that want to export a safe product to Europe. This is the core business of the SPIC project. Support stakeholders in China and Southeast Asia to better understand how to export safe product and following European rules and standards. We can see how year over year the export from Vietnam to Europe is getting bigger and bigger. And consequently, as SPIC project, for us is a great pleasure today to deliver this webinar. Today we will talk about e-commerce. E-commerce represents the future, because we can see how more and more operators, but also us in our daily life, we use more e-commerce rather than the traditional business. So I'm sure that you will find this webinar extremely interesting. Now it's with great pleasure that I introduce you one of SPIC's most senior experts, Torben Rachbeck. He will present this webinar and will provide you all the most important information in order to sell and export properly products to Europe via e-commerce. Again, great pleasure to be here today and wish you a webinar that I hope will interest you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gianluca, for these kind words and for the introduction. Thank you very much to HQTS for allowing me to be here today and speak about this topic. I've been looking forward to it, and I think it's a real pleasure for me to be able to give these presentations. So thanks a lot for that. Let me just start by sharing my screen, because I have a presentation for you like this. And here we go. As we already discussed, we will be discussing today something about online sales. How do you sell products online to consumers in the EU? I will try to cover these topics in my presentation. First, we will have a brief look at the legal framework that governs this area. This legal framework defines a responsible economic operator. So we're going to have a look at who is that, what are the tasks, what are the responsibilities. And the legislation also defines a role called the authorized representative, which we will also have to go into a discussion. And finally, I've promised Anthony to give a very brief introduction to some upcoming developments in legislation that could be relevant for you to to prepare yourself for the future. But let us start by having a look at the legal framework. There are two pieces of legislation that are particularly relevant when you're discussing product safety and online sales. The first one is the General Product Safety Regulation. If you follow the other QR code, it will take you to the Commission website where you can download the legal text for free. The other piece of legislation is the Market Surveillance Regulation. And again, the QR code will take you to a website where you can download it for free. But let's have a look at the key requirements of the Product Safety Regulation. The first and most important point in that regulation is that products must be safe. All products must be safe, or strictly speaking, all consumer products must be safe for the consumer to use. The legislation also says that all the actors in the supply chain are responsible for product safety. Of course, they have different shares. The manufacturer has a very big part, but all actors are responsible and have some responsibility. And they are also obliged to react if they suspect that one of their products present a product safety issue. They must take action, and they must do this even after the product has been sold. The responsibility does not stop when the product is handed over to the consumer. And finally, the regulation defines a number of administrative requirements that all products must fulfill. When it comes to online sales, then the legislation, the General Product Safety Regulation, includes a further number of requirements. This is information that must be presented when a product is sold on a website. First of all, the manufacturer must be clearly identified. So the name and the postal address and the electronic contact address, like an email, must be stated for the product. Likewise, the marking must also identify the responsible economic operator, and we'll come back to that later, who that is. But again, it must list the name and the postal address and the electronic contract address. And these addresses, the postal address must be so detailed that you can imagine that a postman would come and deliver a physical letter on that address, which will be taken hand of. And likewise, the electronic contact addresses could be an email, but it must be a mailbox where somebody monitors it and take action. It's not allowed to have a mailbox where emails just stop and nothing happens to them. Thirdly, the website must, of course, identify the product. So you must put a picture of the product, you must describe what the product type is, and then you must indicate any other product identifiers that could help the consumer identify what is the product. And finally, which is probably new to most of you, is that the website must mention all the warnings and all the safety information that goes with the product. So any kind of warning that is affixed to the product or printed on the packaging or on the user guide must be presented also on the website so that the consumer can look at the website and decide whether or not to buy the product. If we then move to the Market Surveillance Regulation, it's a little bit different in the sense that it focuses on obligations for member states and for market surveillance authorities. But it does include two important elements, because one thing is that it establishes this obligation to have a responsible economic operator for any product that is sold in the EU. And the other requirement from the regulation is that it describes how you can designate an authorized representative. And authorized representatives are linked to this responsible economic operator in a way that I'll discuss in a moment. These requirements apply to any kind of online sales, well, any kind of sales, in fact. But today we focus on online sales. Here I have drawn up a scheme of a diagram for a traditional supply chain where a manufacturer sells to an EU importer who brings the product to Europe, and then the importer may or may not use the distributor to get the products all the way through to the consumer. The internet or online element comes because many EU importers or many manufacturers would advertise their products on internet platforms where the EU importers can buy them if they do not know manufacturers already. What is probably at least as interesting is a new supply chain that has emerged over the past years, where businesses outside Europe sell directly to consumers inside Europe. So you can see the supply chain in the bottom. The manufacturer would normally upload information about the product to an online marketplace. The consumer would buy the product from the marketplace, or will find the product on the marketplace and buy it. And then the product is sent probably through a fulfillment service provider to the consumer. As you can see, we suddenly have this new role, fulfillment service provider. Let's just have a look at who that would be. Well, as the name says, it's a service provider. It's a business that makes money not from trading products, but from handling products. And handling could be warehousing or packaging or addressing or dispatching product for a manufacturer. So imagine that you have a factory, say in Vietnam, and you want to sell products to EU consumers. If you don't have a facility service provider or fulfillment service provider, then the consumer would go to your website, order your product, and it will take a transport time of approximately 5-6 weeks for a product to go the way from Vietnam to Europe. And of course, many consumers would consider this to be so long that they don't want to wait for it. So what you can do instead is that the smart manufacturer would set up a storage somewhere in Europe, or rather he would probably rent a storage at one of these fulfillment service providers. And then this service provider would also handle the packaging and the addressing and dispatching. If the product is ordered from somewhere in Europe, then it can be sent from this warehouse that is somewhere else in Europe. And suddenly the delivery time will be cut down from weeks or even months to days, and then you're back in business. The legislation defines that a fulfillment service provider would provide at least 2 of these 4 services, but it would not include postal services and it would not include freight transport, as you can see. There's more legislation that applies to products, and I just mentioned them briefly here. You may have wondered where all the safety requirements in the low voltage directive are. Well, they are found in the sectoral legislation. The QR code will take you to a website with an overview of all the sectoral legislation, which includes the low voltage directive, the EMC directive, toys directive, the personal protective equipment directive, etc., etc. Next to these that deal with safety of consumers, we also have regulations that deal with consumer rights. These consumer rights apply to any kind of trade, be it online or physical. And they include, as you can see in this slide, the right to truthful advertising. Consumers have the right to have faulty goods repaired or replaced. They have the right to enter into contract without unfair clauses. It must be possible to return most goods purchased online within 14 days. There are specific types like subscriptions for mobile phones and software packages that cannot be returned. And then the consumer also has the right to access goods and services on the same terms as local consumers. Right. But let's have a look at this responsible economic operator. Who is that guy? First of all, it is obligatory to appoint such a one. A product can only be placed on the European market if there is a responsible economic operator designated, and he must be established somewhere in the EU. And legislation clearly says that it is illegal to sell B2C, business to consumer, from an online shop outside the EU and directly to a consumer inside the EU if the manufacturer has not designated a responsible economic operator inside the EU. If you ask your legal experts, they will probably come back and say, hey, this only applies to some products because this requirement is found in the market surveillance regulation, Article 4. And this only applies to sectoral legislation to the CE mark products. But then you can turn to your legal expert and say, hey, you have not considered that the general product safety regulation that entered into force 2 years ago, it actually says that it is obligatory to have a responsible economic operator. And then it makes a reference to the market surveillance regulation. So what you can say is that the market surveillance regulation will govern all the CE mark products, and then the general product safety regulation will more or less govern all the rest of the consumer products on the market. So in practice, it means that almost all products on the market must have a responsible economic operator. Who is that person then? Well, it could be a legal person or it could be a natural person. A natural person, that's just a person like you and me. What is important is that it must be an economic operator. So if it is a person that wants to take on this role, then he must operate a company or a business for this purpose. The name and the address, etc., must be printed on the product, so the consumer can look at the product and see who is the responsible economic operator. If it's impossible to print the information on the product because the product is too small, then it's also accepted to print it on the packaging, on the parcel, or in any paper that accompanies the product. And this marking must, like we discussed before, include the name of the manufacturer, of the responsible economic operator, and then it must include contact details like the postal address and the email address for the operator. The tasks and responsibilities for this responsible economic operator are listed on this slide. The operator must verify that the declaration of conformity has been drawn up, and he must store it for at least 10 years and ensure that authorities can ask for it and get it. Likewise, he must verify that technical documentation has been drawn up, and he must again ensure that it's possible to make this available for authorities upon request for at least 10 years. Then the responsible economic operator has the obligation to contact the market surveillance authorities if they suspect that one of their products may be unsafe for consumers. It's obligatory then to report back to the market surveillance authorities that there may be a product safety issue. And finally, the responsible economic operator must cooperate with market surveillance authorities, or he must even take action himself to remove unsafe product from the market and take any measures that can help mitigate the risk posed by unsafe products. And of course, this requirement on the declaration of conformity only applies to CE mark products. There are a few more requirements listed in the legislation. The responsible economic operator must check that the product is in conformity with the technical documentation. If the product changes, then the technical documentation must also change. The operator must check that the product is correctly marked with a type number, a batch number, or serial number. And he must also check that the product is correctly marked with the manufacturer and the contact point, the full address information. And finally, he must check that the product is accompanied by clear instructions and safety information in the languages that are required in the country where the product is sold. One thing that is particularly important here is that the responsible economic operator must be able to document that these checks have actually taken place and what the results are. So there is a need for some sort of written documentation here. Just to sum up about the responsible economic operator, it's an economic operator. It's not a private person. It is an operator that is established inside the EU, and it is somebody who is authorized to speak and act on behalf of the manufacturer. And finally, names and contact details must be indicated on the product or on some paper that accompanies the product. Let's have a look at this responsible economic operator. Who can act as this? And this question will automatically bring us into the question about the authorized representative. So let's discuss that role at the same time. Here I have tried to draw up the supply chain, and you can see that I've combined the two supply chains we had before. In the bottom, in the top we have the traditional supply chain where the manufacturer sells to an EU importer who sells to a distributor who sells to consumers. And in the bottom, we have the new business to a B2C route where the manufacturer sells from an internet platform, probably using a fulfillment service provider, and sells directly to the consumer. And then you can see we suddenly have a green box with the authorized representative. Let me come back to that one in a few moments. Who can be the responsible economic operator? Well, the most obvious one is the manufacturer. If the manufacturer is based in the EU, he would automatically become the responsible economic operator, obviously because he's the one who knows his product. But you could also imagine that a company outside the EU would have an affiliate or a working office or a subsidiary somewhere inside the EU. And in that case, it would be obvious to assign this, to not designate that business as responsible economic operator. Another option that would apply if you are following the business-to-business model is that you have the EU importer. That person could also serve as the responsible economic operator. The legislation mentions the fulfillment service provider, but it really mentions this as a sort of a last resort. If it's not possible to identify any other economic operators, then the fulfillment service operator must be prepared to take upon himself this role. And therefore, I guess a lot of businesses have seen how the fulfillment service providers have begun to prepare themselves and ensure that they have this information in place if somebody asks. And finally, we have the authorized representative. An authorized representative is a business or a person who is authorized to speak and act on behalf of the manufacturer. And moreover, the legislation specifically requires that such an authorized representative must have a written mandate that is issued by the manufacturer. And this mandate must describe the tasks that the authorized representative should fulfill. So the authorized representative could be a natural person or could be a legal person. It must be somebody who is established within the EU, who has a working office there. And there must be a written mandate issued by the manufacturer, and it must mandate the authorized representative to perform all the tasks that the responsible economic operator has. It's not all, the authorized representative must be prepared to provide a copy of this mandate to a market surveillance authority if they ask for it. And finally, the legislation says that the economic operator must have appropriate means to be able to fulfill his tasks, which seems obvious. Let me just leave that hanging in the air for a few seconds, and let me just speak a little bit about market surveillance in the EU, because I have an example, a very beautiful example here, that shows how the market surveillance authorities actually take this very seriously, and they are following up on this. So that is why you've probably seen that people are beginning to prepare and act differently over the past years. First, a few words about the background, about market surveillance as a background. You may know that European member states have designated market surveillance authorities that have the responsibility to check that businesses fulfill their obligations when they place products on the EU market. In practical terms, this means that the member states or the market surveillance authorities will sample products, they will acquire technical documentation, and then they will check that the products comply with the administrative requirements and that they comply with the technical safety requirements. These activities are undertaken at a national level, but the market surveillance authorities also cooperate in what is called joint actions, So there is clearly also an international dimension of this, where the market surveillance authorities target products across all of Europe. I came across this very wonderful German project on online sales, which was very interesting because they focused specifically on the authorized representative. The project was run in 2004-05, and the project aimed at answering these key questions that I've written here. First question was if authorized representatives are designated for products that are sold from websites outside the EU to EU consumers. And the second question was if this information about the authorized representative is true, can it be trusted? And I'm afraid the very short answer is no. Only 4% of the cases identified the correct authorized representative correctly. That means 96% of the cases had errors of different kind. The authorities contacted a number of authorized representatives and asked them and received a big number of interesting reactions, like, I was never authorized representative for this product. Yes, I was authorized representative, but I'm not any longer. Or, yes, I am an authorized representative, but not for this piece of legislation, but only for other pieces. And finally, there were cases where the authorities concluded that it was pure identity theft. Apparently, the manufacturer had simply taken a telephone book and picked a number of names and design and then indicated them on the product, which is obviously illegal. Just some figures to give you an idea about the scale of this project. The authorities came back to the online marketplaces and informed them about this, and one of the online marketplaces reacted by removing 700,000 product listings from their website. If I remember correctly, this affected more than 6,000 sellers of products. And I would even say this is the status I got from summer 2025. The figures have surely grown much since then. So you can see it's quite a significant number of products we're talking about. And this is only one online marketplace. Moreover, what happened was that this online marketplace implemented procedures for verifying information about authorized representatives, meaning that if a seller wants to sell a product today, he or she would probably be faced with the request from the marketplace that you have to provide a copy of the mandate that we can check to see that it actually exists before we can take the product on board and list it. I made some observations when I saw this project, because what I see is that this project really shows that the member states have a huge capacity to check high numbers of products. I still remember I was working with the Danish authorities 25 years ago. And when we had a project where we tested 50 products and required technical information for 100 products, we would consider that to be a gigantic project. And today things have really moved. Today we're not talking hundreds of products, we're talking hundreds of thousands of products. So member states have scaled up their capacity largely. And this is mainly because of the application of IT tools like web crawlers that scan the web and come back every morning with a long list of websites that the market surveillance staff should check. And they're also using scanners that apply artificial intelligence that can check technical documentation and can check thousands of pieces of technical documentation to see if they're correct in a short while. And of course, as we see, internet platforms are reacting on this when they are faced with these requirements. Okay, let's try to look into the mandate and see what is the required content for that. You will remember we said that the authorized representative must have a written mandate from the manufacturer. The mandate must include all the obligatory tasks that the responsible economic operator has to undertake, which I've listed them on this slide, and let me just go over them quickly. verify that the declaration of conformity has been drawn up and that the technical documentation exists, store the declaration of conformity for 10 years, ensure that it's possible to provide all these documents to market surveillance authorities in less than 10 days during these 10 years. Responsibility to contact market surveillance authorities if you find that a product may present safety issues, and cooperate with market surveillance authorities to remove product safety issues of any kind. And again, the requirements linked to the declaration of conformity only apply to products with CE marks. There were more requirements. The responsible economic operator and therefore the authorized representative must check that the product stays in compliance with the technical documentation, that it is marked with a type number, a serial number, that it's marked with contact information of the manufacturer and of the single contact point, and that it is accompanied by instructions and safety instructions in the correct languages. And please note that there may be more than one language in one country. And then finally, the responsible economic operator must be able to provide documented evidence of the checks performed if a market surveillance authority asks for it. When I see this, I have a few recommendations for you. One thing, obviously, is that you must ensure that the mandate includes all the required tasks. I can easily imagine that an AI-driven scanner could scan over a mandate and say, oops, we have too few points in this, something is missing, and then you are already on the radar. I would also say that it is always recommendable to issue written mandates, even if it may not be required. If you have this situation where the importer may take on board the role, or if you have an office in a member state, even in those cases, I would prefer to have a written mandate. And that's because once you put things in writing, you have a very clear division of responsibilities. Who will do what? It's clear from the beginning, so the responsible economic operator can prepare and take that into account. It's also a way of managing expectations. And that's why I have the final recommendation to be as precise as possible. The legislation says you must check that the product stays in conformity. You must check that the marking is okay. I would suggest that you put in writing here how often should that take place, and as well, how do you document this? You put the information in the checklist and you find it on the case or whatever. But again, it's a lot easier if you've been precise, describing this is the way things are divided, this is what we want you to do, and this is exactly where we want you to, this is exactly the way we want you to do it. Right. Then let me just briefly mention something about upcoming developments that you may want to prepare for. Something that is cooking, boiling in the European Union. And what I would like to speak about here is the Eco Design for Sustainable Products Regulation, or just the ESPR. It was passed 2 years ago, and implementation has begun. And it contains a number of items that will affect you over time. First of all, it introduces a digital product passport. The idea is in the future that all products that are traded across borders must have passports, like human beings have passports when they're traveling across countries as well. Legislation is being put in place, and there will be more and more delegated acts, legal acts, that will describe how these products would look like for different product groups. We can also see that this regulation introduces enhanced sustainability requirements. Consumers are simply interested in understanding how their products are made and that they're made in a sustainable way. So manufacturers are in an increasing degree facing these requirements. One of them, which you've probably heard of, is this ban on burning of unsold textiles that will kick in, I believe, in this year. And finally, I've noted the increasing due diligence requirements. A lot of these requirements means that the manufacturers are, or the European sellers are requested to document, for instance, that their products are made in a sustainable way. And they can only do that if they have a chain further back to the manufacturer showing how products are being made, that they are indeed made in a sustainable way, etc. You may say this is only for Europeans, and that is correct on the short run, but in the long run, this will affect manufacturers outside the EU because the European traders will not be able to answer all these questions without the information from their suppliers outside the EU. So I think it's something that would be very good to keep on the radar and then consider how you can build this into your company in the next few years because these requirements are coming and they are growing. Let me finish by some concluding remarks. And let me start from the bottom of this slide. You find a QR code that will refer you to a fact sheet that we have produced that explains everything you need to know about selling online to EU consumers. But what we have spoken about today, or what I've told you about, is that it is obligatory to appoint a responsible economic operator when you're selling to the EU market. We discussed that several times. One person who can act as responsible economic operator can be an authorized representative who is authorized to speak and act on behalf of the manufacturer. A representative is authorized through a written mandate issued by the manufacturer. And then we saw this example that member states monitor that these obligations are fulfilled and they take action if not. So a strong advice from here to follow these rules. Speaking of this, I would like also to refer you to a number of websites that would be very interesting, I believe, for you. In our project, we have we've prepared the Speak Finder, which is a library of fact sheets, what we call all you need to know about product safety. Have a look for yourself if you follow the other QR code. If you prefer to have e-learning or learn by e-learning, we also have an e-learning tool which you can access in the bottom QR code. It's called Speak Academy. And finally, if you like to get in touch, please do not hesitate. Here you can see the email address of the project. The blue square contains the link to the website, and the red square contains the link to the WeChat account. That was what I wanted to say. Thank you very much for listening. It's been a pleasure to give this presentation. I will hand back to Anthony.
Thank you so much, Torben, for the information and such a well-prepared webinar as usual. We have some questions in the chat, which we'll address after Duke's presentation. So we're going to have a few case studies presented by Duke first, and then we'll move into the Q&A. So if you have any questions that you'd like to leave in our chat box, please leave it in the Zoom webinar chat. Make sure you address the question to everyone, just so it appears in that chat box so everyone can see the question. Now, to introduce our next guest speaker, we have Lee Min Duc. He's our Assistant Sales and Business Development Manager in our Vietnam office and laboratory. Duc is a quality specialist for textile, apparel, and footwear. He has worked closely with customers all across Southeast Asia, not only Vietnam. Also with a lot of experience regarding European compliance, and is here to help secure quality for all our supply chains globally. So Duke has a few case studies he'd like to share with us specifically related to Torben's content. So Duke, I'll give you the floor and you may share your screen.
So, okay, so I have been sharing my screen. So thank you, Anthony, so much for your kind introductions. So I briefly again, I will share my case study about what we have done for our client. Okay. Okay. First of all, I would like to give a brief introduction about our client, Mr. DYI. Mr. DYI is a Malaysian-based home improvement retailer. They are part of Mr. DYI Group Berhad and provide the home improvement product for doing it yourself project through online and also offline store. Mr. DIY Group own and operate over 3,500 stores in Asia and Europe market, including Malaysia, Thailand, Brunei, Indonesia, Philippines, Spain, Turkey, Vietnam, and so more. Okay. So during talking with them, they have raised some issue about the document review. So this is how they are facing the problem current previously. Because they are expand the market, they expand their business to the Japan market and require the product compliant consultancies before the select SKUs are putting into the mass production to make sure that the packaging, the quality specification meet the EU and Spain local regulations. Um, so that they expect that they supplier to provide the necessary certification, report, document to prove that their product meet the market regulation. And since they have a limited of people and also it takes time for them to research by themselves. So to save their time, they need a professional company to support them. And that's why they come to HQTS. Okay. And after hearing their concern and so they issue, we have come up with a solution, a long solution, but however also comprehensive to cover up all of your concern. The first one is HQTS train and manage a team led by the project manager, and that is that will focus on their Mr. DIY products. The second, then this project manager in the team act like the collaborate hub among the Mr. DIY Malaysian team, Spain team, and also the supplier in China and local authority in Spain and headquartered engineering and lab resource. You can see that there's many party in this project. And this project manager also collaborate with headquarters team to review the SKU list provided by Mr. DIY and offer a quotation to client accordingly. Once the Mr. DIY confirm, headquarters team will evaluate the SKU list and necessary document in a share file in accordance to the regulation of sale market in 5 working days only. And our team also review all the documents submitted by supplier and gave the comment on the compliance until the all necessary documents were correct and ready. So this is need to have the one who have the good knowledge about the regulation to do that. That's why executive team will take over this one. And the last one, executive support the answer and to any question raised by the local authority of Spain and regarding to the product compliance issue. In even the Spanish custom request, any document amended, and Hakute will work with the supplier to get it done and send it as soon as possible. Okay. Beside that, we also provide the one-stop solution that include in the supply chain. You can see here that we provide the supplier verification to check if the supplier are real, are capable, or reliable, and then we also check them if they have the if they are met, if they are good in the environment and also the quality benchmark. And and then we do the testing for the client if they need to verify the safety and quality and compliance of the products. And and then when it goes to the mass production, we can inspect according to every state to avoid the recall and ensure the standard. And then there are more service that we can offer to our client. Okay. HQTS, we are global since the supply chain also the global. We have more than 80 countries and 40 office with more than 2,500 staff and have served for more than 50,000 brands. And to talk about selling online, HQTS are also in list in the service provider network of Amazon, one of the e-commerce platform the biggest e-commerce platform in the globe, and so that you can get to this website and to find our headquarters, or you can contact to us. So we hope that we can support you for all the testing and inspection for toy, apparel, footwear, and then we hope that if you have any question, you can let us know. Okay. Here there are some other client of us, and we have served for your information. Yeah, thank you so much. That's it, my friend.
Thank you, Duke, for sharing the case studies and also bringing to life some of the notes pointed out in Torben's content, as well as sharing with everyone our services that we offer at HQTS. So if any of those services relate to some of your products, please let us know. You can reach out. I know we have a few questions to run through. So if anything else comes up, feel free to contact myself, Duke, or Torben via email. Okay, let's begin with some of the questions. I think let's first jump through some of the live questions because I know we have a few of our viewers waiting for these answers. So let's dive through the live questions, and we have a few other questions submitted to us via email beforehand for some of the other registrants that may not have been able to attend online live. So first question from Ksenia. Are all e-commerce platforms required to follow these rules and mandates, or there is a gradation of platforms on that topic, medium to large, or small ones also? Does it depend on product category? Torben?
Thanks for the question. It's a very good question. As I recall it, there are no differences across product categories. The requirements apply to any kind of platform and any kind of product. When it comes to size, these requirements apply to all requirements, but there are additional, as far as I remember, there are additional requirements to the very big platforms, and they are defined somewhere in the legislation what that would mean. But the easy answer is to say these requirements apply to all products and to all sizes of platforms.
Fantastic. So I guess, Ksenia, this doesn't just mean Amazon or eBay. It covers all platforms as long as it's I guess an online retail product, right? Or maybe it might be your own website. Maybe it might be a Shopify website as well. Yeah. So all umbrella under that umbrella. Okay. If you have a
Correct.
follow-up question, also feel free to drop that in the webinar chat. Next up, we have John Hurst. So John Hurst seems to be based in the UK. He asks, since we're UK based, do we need a EU responsible economic operator to sell online into the EU?
Again, a very good question. I'm not fully updated on the UK requirements, but I would expect that it is required to have a responsible economic operator for the EU, even if you're a UK company. And that's for two reasons I said this. One is that the legislation clearly speaks about economic operators established in the EU, full stop. They don't say EU or the UK or whatever. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, from what I know, the requirement the other way around is that if a company is established in the EU and sells products to UK, they would still have to designate a UK representative. So I would suppose that it means that if you are based in the UK, you must also have an EU representative, an EU responsible economic operator.
Fantastic. Thank you, Torben. I guess the UK is always a tricky one, isn't it?
Exactly.
Uh, Hope that answers your question, John. And if you have any follow-up questions, please let us know in the chat. I've also received a question from Vibav. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. and I do apologize if I haven't. He's actually sent that to a host and panelists, so maybe some of you guys in the chat can't see his question. He asks, are you in UKCA for machine directive? I think that question is more directed to HQTS as a third party quality service provider. The answer is yes. We have covered the UKCA before. Specific to your product and your specific needs, you can contact us, or you can contact Duke. Maybe if you're in Southeast Asia, you can contact Duke directly and he'll be able to answer anything specific to you. Please share your contact details for UKCA. Sure. So I think I should have your contact details, Vibav, since you've registered for this webinar, and I'll send you an email after this to introduce you to someone from our team that hopefully can address some of your questions. Yeah. Okay. Um, any other live questions from the chat? Feel free to leave into the message box. Until then, we have a few questions submitted online previously. Oh, here we go. John's back. I love it, John. So John's question here, I guess it's a follow-up to your answer, Torben. If we use a European fulfillment center in Germany or Poland, is the third-party logistics liable?
And by liable, I suppose you refer to this responsible economic operator. Yes, if there are no other responsible economic operators designated for this product, then it would be the authorities would turn to the fulfillment center and ask them for the information.
Yeah.
And then
So
probably coming back to the requirements, I think it would be a very good idea in that situation that you get in touch with the EU fulfillment center and clearly agree who's doing what and what are they supposed to do, so it doesn't come as a surprise for them when if an authority suddenly knocks on the door.
yeah, I think the worst case scenario is if you think the 3PL is responsible and they think you've already got it covered, and when something happens, they everyone's lost and confused, right? You don't want that.
In Danish, we say
So
if two people share responsibility, they have 5% each, so
yeah, 5% each, the other 90 somewhere else.
maximum. Yeah.
So John, hopefully that answers your question. If you need any help to follow up on that, you can reach out to Torben or you can reach out to Duke and the team. Okay, so if there's any other live questions, like I said, drop it in the chat. I have a few questions submitted previously online ahead of the webinar. I guess for those that wasn't able to join us live, they're hoping to watch back on the recorded video. So first questions here. We sell B2B, but also B2C in different countries. Are the rules different? What's the best way to manage?
Wow. No, the easy one first. The rules are the same whether you sell business to business or business to consumers. There may be a little difference in how you implement the rules, but the rules are the same. The best way to follow, well, follow the rules. It's really a tricky question for me to answer. I think some of the examples that Duke showed a way of setting up a system, meaning that you were able to react on to fulfill these requirements and react on requests from authorities. So that could probably be a source of inspiration, I would guess.
Yeah. So I think it's a bit difficult, especially with Europe, with so many countries, and if you move B2B in other countries with some licensees, and if you're selling direct to consumer in other countries. I think best way forward, like what Torben said, is do your research, do your due diligence. Yeah. And some of these strategies that Duke has presented in his case studies, feel free to watch back on this playback link when we send you guys the recordings, because a lot of the information that you're looking for might be in the video, the recorded video, and you can watch that back. If you have anything very specific, we may need more information from you to answer that, responsibly, right? So feel free again to reach out to us on the back end with more specific um, information. Second question here, submitted online. What's the criteria for choosing the best authorized representative?
That's a tricky question. I could say what I would do if I was going to look for an authorized representative. First of all, I would check that they would be familiar with the requirements, and I would be very precise when I contacted them and saying these are the legal requirements that you have to fulfill. Then I would probably ask if it was possible to get references. I'm a consultant myself, and I'm often faced with people that say, "Do you have any references that we can ask?" So that could be a thing for this authorized representative. And it would probably also for me be a question of asking if I could see how they are the procedures they have put in place to handle the different requests for the different products so that I get an impression of this business to see if it's trustworthy and if I can, I mean, they would carry a lot of responsibility if I were going to use them because they would handle all the communication with the legislators. But it's for me, it's a lot about establishing the confidence in such a business to understand that they are actually able to fulfill the formal requirements.
Yeah, agreed. And I think just to add on to some of what the important points that Torben has already made, I think a few things you should also take note is their responsiveness because you're relying on these people to respond to anyone that has any questions knocking on the door in Europe, right? Another one, I guess, is of course this may be a bit. It's not always for certain, but I would say whoever's been an AR for longer, because I think it's the nowadays with these legislations, a lot of people are coming out to do this business as an authorized representative. But the guys that have done it for longer generally means that they have a built-up client base. So they do it for a living. Whereas someone that might have started is just doing it to test the waters, and if they don't have enough clients, they forget about it completely and they leave it in the back. So just keep that in mind as well. It's not for certain, but I think tenure and experience is and history is very important. Yeah.
I agree.
The third question submitted online is, can we use a single European contact information plus address for all products, even when we sell in different EU countries? Somewhat similar to the first question.
Yeah, this is also a very good question, and it's one of the curses of the European Union that we have all these many languages. But I think, yes, it's possible to use one contact address, and it's possible to use it even if you're selling a lot of products. The point is that the consumer must always be able to contact a company and then get the service or get his answers replied. The legislation does not say anything about how promptly this should happen. So I would expect that it would be okay to say something like, "Hello, good morning" to the customer who calls in, say, "I'm sorry, this is something that requires that we get the seller of Croatia or a representative from the Danish head office or whatever to reply back." I think what is important is that the consumers experience that they contact the company and somebody takes care of their case promptly, which would not mean instantaneously, but within, for instance, a couple of hours or something. And then it must be possible, I expect that the consumer should be able to speak his own language to the people that are meeting them. And I could imagine that it could be done in the way that you call a telephone number and probably somebody says, "Okay, I'm not very good at speaking Danish, so can I please call a Danish? Can I just call somebody to get them call you back?" That should be possible. But baseline, it's okay to have only one contact address on the product, provided that it reacts and it's able to help consumers from any of the countries where the product is sold.
Yeah. A follow-up question to that, Torben, is maybe I've missed it, but is there um, is there any benefit in adding, say, for example, Danish and then English as a secondary language in some of the labeling
Well,
and the technical documents?
but I've seen a lot of user guides that are written in, for instance, Danish, Norwegian, and Swedish, and then you have an English translation as well.
Yeah,
It's not required by the Danish authorities, and they wouldn't check it. So it should be, because it would increase the usability of the document in other
right.
contexts, and then you can suddenly sell it in England or in Malta or, well, outside the European Union.
Yeah. Okay, well noted. Thanks for that, Torben. And then we have a fourth question just before the final question. So the fourth question is there a limit to how many products an economic operator can be responsible for?
There's not. The German market surveillance project, I remember they came across a case where there was one authorized representative was authorized for 1.6 million products.
Wow.
What is important is that if I were a market surveillance authorities that were checking with such a company, I would ask, how on earth do you ensure that you're able to respond to needs for any of these products? Because one thing is they're responsible, but it also means that you have to be able to take action if products come back. And if you are coming back to this about people who happy-go-lucky that just enter this business, somebody who has entered this business is responsible for a lot of products, and they only have one person sitting working
Yeah,
part-time on this. I mean, that doesn't match up. But in principle, an economic operator could take as many products as possible as he wish. But I would say the responsible economic operator must be able to explain how on earth he would work with 1.6 million products. So,
yeah, agreed. So it sounds like there's no written hard limit, but there's
correct.
serviceability in able to address all these products if issues do come up is a real concern, especially if you're the, 1 millionth and one product. Then
Yeah,
that's getting scary.
exactly, exactly. Yes. And remember, some of the obligations could be to make a recall of a product. And I can imagine that if a business is engaged in making recalls two, three, four places at the same time, then they're fully occupied with that. So it's something that has to be taken seriously.
Agreed. And the final question here submitted online is it possible for a person to act as a responsible economic operator?
Yes, if that person does this as some sort of business activity, if the person has a company set up that will deal with this job, and that could be a personally owned company, but it must be a business of some sort.
Yeah. So I guess this goes back to similar to the previous question, the serviceability. If you're a one-man show, how do you plan on executing? Maybe you may have a limit of five products or one product that you're able to address, but when we start moving up, how do you actually do that? These days, almost anyone can register as a business and start acting. So I'd be very careful. Yeah.
Exactly.
Um, are there any other questions from the live chat before we conclude? So maybe I'll give it a few minutes. But until then, just remember we will be sending a recorded version or a link to the recorded version via email to everyone that's registered to this webinar. And if you are interested in previous webinars that we've collaborated with Speak and Torben in the past, they're also up on our website in the webinar tab. So feel free to access those webinars. We'll also send out emails to Vibav, like we've mentioned before regarding the UKCA. I'll just quickly liaise with the team and see who best to link into that email chain. Okay, so thank you again, everyone, for joining us for this webinar in collaboration with Speak. I'd like to also thank Torben for such a well-prepared and informative presentation. Also, really big thanks to Duc from our Vietnam office to take the time to share some real life case studies with us. Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. And it was a pleasure again, as usual. We'll catch up again at the next webinar.